Femi Adewale sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the sparkling view of Lagos through the large windows of his penthouse. The room was quiet, too quiet for someone like Femi, who usually had friends over or music blasting in the background. Tonight, however, there was no party, no noise. Just him and the sound of his father's words ringing in his head. "Femi, you're wasting your life," Chief Adewale had shouted earlier that day. "Do you think all this money will always protect you? You don't know anything about hard work or real people. You live in a bubble." Femi had argued back as he always did. "I've been managing the company accounts. Dad, what else do you want me to do? I want you to grow up," his father had snapped. "You don't understand life outside this wealth. You don't know what it means to struggle." The words stung more than Femi wanted to admit. He had everything. A shiny sports car, designer clothes, and endless spending money. But he knew his father was right. He had never worked for any of it. Everywhere he went, people treated him differently because of his last name. Friendships felt fake, relationships even worse. Everyone wanted something from him. As he sat there thinking, an idea began to form in his mind. What if he could prove his father wrong? What if he stepped out of the shadow of the Adewale fortune and lived like an ordinary person? The thought excited and terrified him at the same time. But then, a grin spread across his face. He grabbed his phone and dialed his father. The line clicked, and Chief Adewale's deep voice answered. "What is it now, Femi?" "I've got a plan, Dad," Femi said, trying to sound confident. "I'll prove to you that I'm not some spoiled rich kid. I'll live like a regular person for 3 months. No penthouse, no fancy car. I'll even work." Chief Adewale laughed, but it wasn't the friendly kind. "You? Work? Doing what?" "Running a cafe on Instagram." "I'm serious," Femi shot back. "I'll be a taxi driver." The line went silent for a moment. Then his father spoke, his tone skeptical. "And how exactly is that supposed to work? You don't even know how to use public transport." Femi leaned back on the bed, feeling a surge of determination. "I'll figure it out. You'll see. I'll make it 3 months, and I won't touch a naira of your money." Chief Adewale sighed. "Fine. Let's see how long you last. But don't come running back to me when you realize you can't handle it." The call ended, and Femi felt a mix of excitement and fear. This was it, his chance to step out of his comfort zone. But first, he needed to prepare. The next morning, Femi left his penthouse and drove to a used car lot on the mainland. His flashy sports car stood out like a sore thumb among the rows of dusty, battered vehicles. He walked up to an older man sitting on a stool by the gate. "Good morning, sir," Femi said, trying to sound humble. The man squinted at him. "What do you want here, Oga? We don't sell Lamborghinis." Femi chuckled awkwardly. "I'm not looking for a Lamborghini. I need a taxi. Something simple." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly suspicious, but he led Femi to a beat-up yellow cab parked at the back. The car looked like it had seen better days. Its paint was peeling, and one of the side mirrors was held together with tape. "This one works," the man said. "Barely, but it's cheap." Femi bought the car without haggling, something that made the seller look at him strangely. But Femi didn't care. This was all part of the plan. That evening, Femi parked his new taxi outside his penthouse and stared at it for a long time. He was starting to realize just how different his life was about to become. No more valet parking, no more chauffeurs, no more being Femi Adewale, the billionaire's son. From now on, he was just Femi the taxi driver. His friends didn't make things any easier. When they found out about his plan, they laughed so hard that tears streamed down their faces. "You? Driving a taxi?" his best friend, Jide, said between gasps of laughter. "Do you even know how to talk to regular people?" Femi rolled his eyes. "Watch me. I'll be the best taxi driver Lagos has ever seen." Another friend, Teo, leaned forward, smirking. "What's the real reason for this, though? Is this about proving something to your dad? Or is it about impressing some girl?" "Neither," Femi said, though deep down he wasn't so sure. Maybe he did want to prove something, not just to his father but to himself. He was tired of being seen as a spoiled rich kid. He wanted to be more than that. The next morning, Femi officially started his new job. He dressed in a plain t-shirt and jeans, a far cry from his usual designer outfits. He slid into the driver's seat of his taxi, adjusted the mirrors, and took a deep breath. "Here we go," he muttered to himself. At first, it was a disaster. He didn't know how to handle the rough Lagos traffic, and passengers complained about his slow driving. A few even yelled at him for taking wrong turns. But Femi didn't give up. By the end of the first day, he was sweaty, exhausted, and more determined than ever. As the weeks went by, Femi began to settle into his new life. He learned how to navigate the chaotic streets, how to deal with grumpy passengers, and even how to negotiate fares. He still had a lot to learn, but he was starting to feel like he was making progress. The evening air was cool, and the rain was steady but not heavy, creating small puddles on the uneven streets of Lagos. Femi sighed as he gripped the steering wheel of his taxi, his eyes darting to the line of passengers standing under an awning at the bus stop. He hadn't had much luck that day, and his stomach growled as a reminder that he hadn't eaten since morning. He glanced at the dashboard, where a half-empty bottle of water rolled back and forth with each movement of the car. Just as he was about to give up for the day, a woman waved at him from the curb. She was carrying a small bag and looked like she had been running through the rain. Femi pulled up beside her and rolled down the window. "Taxi?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "Yes," she said quickly, her voice firm but tired. "Hospital Road. Please." Without another word, she opened the door and climbed into the back seat. Femi glanced at her in the rearview mirror. She looked younger than he'd first thought, maybe in her late 20s, and her plain blue scrubs told him she worked in healthcare. Her braided hair was damp from the rain, and she clutched her bag tightly as if it held something valuable. "You're a nurse?" Femi asked, trying to make conversation. The woman sighed, leaning her head back against the seat. "Yes, and I'm very late, so please just drive." Her tone was sharp, but Femi wasn't offended. She looked stressed, and he figured it was best to focus on the road. The streets were crowded, as usual, with cars honking and pedestrians weaving between them like they owned the place. Femi navigated through the chaos, his hands gripping the wheel tightly. After a few minutes of silence, Femi decided to try again. "Rough day." The woman's eyes opened slowly, and she gave him a tired look through the mirror. "Every day is rough," she said, her voice softer this time. "Do you know how many hours I've been on my feet today? And now, thanks to this rain and traffic, I'm going to be late for my night shift." "I can see that," Femi said with a small smile, trying to lighten the mood. Lagos traffic doesn't care if you're tired or late. It's just there to make everyone's life harder. To his surprise, the woman let out a small laugh. "You're not wrong," she admitted, "but you don't sound like a regular taxi driver. Most of them don't talk this much." Femi shrugged. "Well, maybe I'm not like most taxi drivers." She raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. The conversation drifted back into silence, and Femi focused on maneuvering through the flooded streets. As they reached a particularly congested area, he tapped the steering wheel impatiently. "So, what's your name?" he asked, glancing back at her through the mirror. "If we're stuck in traffic, we might as well talk." She hesitated for a moment before replying. "Nkem." "Nkem," Femi repeated, testing the name. "It suits you. I'm Femi." "Nice to meet you, Femi," she said, though her tone suggested she was just being polite. "Now, can we get moving? I really don't want to be late." Femi chuckled. "Trust me, I'm trying. But unless I can turn this taxi into a boat, we're stuck for now." As the minutes dragged on, Nkem's frustration became more visible. She kept glancing at her phone, muttering under her breath. Femi watched her through the mirror, feeling a strange urge to cheer her up. "Do you always work late shifts like this?" he asked. "Most of the time," she replied, rubbing her temples. "The clinic is short-staffed, and there's always someone who needs help. It's exhausting, but I can't just leave people hanging." "That sounds tough," Femi said, genuinely impressed. "You must really care about your job." "It's not just a job," Nkem said firmly, her eyes meeting his through the mirror. "It's about helping people. Some of the patients we see can't afford treatment anywhere else. If I don't show up, who will? Femi nodded, feeling a pang of guilt. Her life seemed so different from his. While he'd spent his days lounging in luxury, people like Nkem were out here making real sacrifices. Do you ever get a break? He asked. She laughed bitterly. What's a break? Between work and taking care of my family, there's no such thing. My younger brother is in school, and my mom isn't well. I have to handle everything. Femi didn't know what to say to that. He wanted to tell her how much he admired her, but he didn't think she'd take him seriously. Instead, he decided to focus on getting her to the hospital as quickly as possible. The rain had slowed to a drizzle by the time they reached the clinic. Nkem gathered her things and opened the door, but before she stepped out, she turned back to Femi. Thanks for the ride, she said, her voice softer than before. Sorry if I was a bit rude earlier. It's been a long day. No problem, Femi said with a grin. I get it. And hey, if you ever need a ride again, just look for the best taxi driver in Lagos. She rolled her eyes but smiled slightly. I'll keep that in mind. As she walked into the clinic, Femi watched her through the window. There was something about Nkem that stuck with him, her strength, her dedication, and the way she spoke her mind without hesitation. She was unlike anyone he'd met before, and he couldn't help but feel curious about her. That night, Femi couldn't stop thinking about Nkem. He tried to brush it off, telling himself that she was just another passenger. But it didn't work. There was something about her that intrigued him, and he found himself wondering if their paths would cross again. The next day, Femi parked his taxi near the hospital, hoping to see her. He felt a little silly. After all, Lagos was a big city, and she was just one person among millions. But as the hours passed, he couldn't shake the feeling that he might see her again. Finally, as the sun began to set, he saw her walking out of the hospital, her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked just as tired as the night before, but there was a determination in her step that made Femi smile. He rolled down the window and called out, "Need a ride?" Nkem stopped and turned, her eyes widening slightly when she saw him. "You again?" "Me again," Femi said with a grin. "So what do you say? Need a lift?" She hesitated for a moment before walking over to the taxi. "All right, but don't think I'm going to start calling you my personal driver." Femi laughed as she climbed into the car. "Noted. So where to?" Nkem gave him an address, and they set off. This time, the ride was less awkward. They talked about the chaos of Lagos, their favorite foods, and even shared a few jokes. Femi found himself enjoying her company more than he expected. By the time they reached her destination, he felt like he'd learned a little more about who she was. And as she stepped out of the taxi, he couldn't help but hope that this wasn't the last time he'd see her. "Thanks, Femi," she said before closing the door. "Take care." "You too, Nkem," he replied, watching as she disappeared into the crowd. As he drove away, Femi couldn't help but smile. His plan to prove himself to his father had taken an unexpected turn, and he was starting to realize that this taxi driving adventure might lead to more than just a lesson in humility. The next few days felt different for Femi. Every time he drove his taxi, his thoughts wandered to Nkem. He wasn't sure why she had such an effect on him. Maybe it was her fierce determination or the way she spoke her mind. Whatever it was, Femi couldn't stop himself from parking near her hospital, hoping to see her again. It wasn't long before his plan worked. One evening, just as the sun was dipping below the Lagos skyline, Femi spotted Nkem stepping out of the clinic. She looked as tired as ever, her bag slung over her shoulder and her face carrying the weight of the long day. But even in her exhaustion, there was something strong and steady about her. Femi rolled down his window and called out, "Heading home, Nkem?" She stopped and looked at him, her lips curving into a small smile. "You're starting to make me wonder if you're stalking me." Femi laughed, leaning against the steering wheel. "I'm not stalking you. I just happen to be around. Besides, you're my favorite passenger. Hop in." Nkem hesitated for a moment but then sighed and opened the door. "All right, Femi the taxi driver. But don't think this means you're my personal chauffeur." As she settled into the back seat, Femi started the car. "Noted. So, how was your day?" Nkem let out a tired laugh. "You really want to know?" Let's see. 2 emergencies, 3 patients who couldn't pay for treatment, and a broken air conditioner in the clinic. It's been fun. Sounds like a nightmare, Femi said, glancing at her through the mirror. But you still show up every day. Why? Because someone has to, Nkem replied, her voice firm. If I don't, who will? Most of the people who come to our clinic have nowhere else to go. I can't just leave them. Femi nodded, impressed by her dedication. You're amazing, you know that? I mean, not everyone would put up with all that. Kem snorted. Amazing? Hardly. I'm just doing my job. They drove in silence for a while after that, the soft hum of the engine filling the space. Femi stole glances at Nkem through the mirror, noticing the way she stared out the window as if lost in thought. When they reached her neighborhood, Nkem turned to Femi. You know, you talk a lot for a taxi driver. Femi grinned. You've said that before. Maybe it's because I enjoy talking to you. She raised an eyebrow. Is that your way of saying you don't talk this much with other passengers? Exactly, Femi said with a laugh. Consider yourself special. Nkem shook her head, but there was a small smile on her lips. You're something else, Femi. As she stepped out of the car, Femi felt a strange sense of disappointment. He didn't want the conversation to end. But before he could say anything, she leaned back in and said, Thanks for the ride. Take care. You too, Nkem, Femi replied, watching as she walked away. Over the next few weeks, Femi and Nkem developed an unspoken routine. He would often park near the clinic in the evenings, and more often than not, she would accept a ride home. Their conversations grew longer and more personal, each ride feeling less like a transaction and more like a meeting between friends. One night, as Femi drove her home, he decided to ask a question that had been on his mind for a while. Nkem, do you ever take a break? Like, just for yourself? She laughed, shaking her head. A break? What's that? I'm serious, Femi said, glancing at her through the mirror. You work all the time, you take care of your family. Don't you ever do something just for you? Nkem sighed, her smile fading slightly. There's no time for that, Femi. My family depends on me. My mom is sick. My younger brother is in school. If I don't keep going, who will? Femi was quiet for a moment, his hands tightening on the wheel. He admired her strength, but it also made him sad. She carried so much on her shoulders, and it didn't seem fair. Well, he said finally, if you ever decide to take a break, let me know. Maybe I can help. Nkem looked at him, her expression softening. You're a strange one, Femi, but thanks. One evening, as they were driving, the car hit a rough patch of traffic. Femi sighed, tapping his fingers on the wheel. Ah, Lagos traffic. The city's greatest gift. Kem laughed. You're handling it better than most taxi drivers I know. Usually, they're yelling at other drivers by now. Maybe I'm just a peaceful person, Femi said with a grin. Or maybe I've learned to accept that Lagos traffic is like the rain. You can't stop it, so you might as well live with it. You have an interesting way of looking at things, Nkem said, leaning back in her seat. You're not like most people I meet. And you're not like most passengers, Femi replied. Most people just sit in the back and stare at their phones. But you actually talk to me. It's nice. Nkem smiled, her gaze drifting to the window. Well, maybe you're easy to talk to. Femi's chest tightened at her words, but he quickly brushed the feeling aside. He didn't want to read too much into it. For now, he was just glad they had become friends. As the weeks went on, Femi found himself looking forward to his evenings with Nkem. Their conversations were always lively, filled with laughter and moments of quiet honesty. She told him about her dreams of one day expanding the clinic to help more people, and he listened, amazed by her passion. One night, as they were driving, Nkem turned to him and asked, So, Femi, what about you? What's your story? Femi hesitated, caught off guard by the question. My story? It's not that interesting. Come on, Nkem said, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. You're not like other taxi drivers. You talk differently, you act differently. There's more to you than you're letting on. Femi laughed nervously. Maybe I'm just a good actor. Nkem tilted her head, studying him. Maybe, but I think there's more to it than that. Femi didn't know what to say. He couldn't tell her the truth. Not yet. So, he just shrugged and said, "Let's just say I'm trying to figure things out." Nkem nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Aren't we all?" By the time they reached her house, Femi felt a strange mix of relief and regret. He was glad they were getting to know each other, but he also knew that his secret was becoming harder to keep. Still, as Nkem stepped out of the car and waved goodbye, he couldn't help but smile. "Good night, Nkem," he said. "Good night, Femi," she replied, her voice warm. As Femi drove away, he realized something he hadn't expected. This wasn't just about proving himself to his father anymore. Nkem had become an important part of his life, and he wasn't sure what that meant. But one thing was clear: he wasn't ready to let go of this connection, no matter what. Femi sat in his taxi outside the clinic, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel. He had come to expect these moments of waiting, hoping to catch Nkem at the end of her shift. It had become part of his routine now, one he looked forward to more than he liked to admit. But as he stared at the clinic's entrance, a new feeling crept into his chest: doubt. For weeks, he had been getting closer to Nkem. Their conversations were honest, and her warmth and strength made him want to be around her even more. But there was one thing he couldn't bring himself to do: tell her the truth. Every time she asked about his life, he dodged the question. Every time she looked at him with curiosity, he felt like a fraud. Tonight, though, felt heavier than usual. The lie he was living was growing harder to carry. As Nkem walked out of the clinic and spotted his taxi, he forced himself to smile, even though his heart felt weighed down. "Femi," she said as she climbed into the car. "You're here again. Do you ever go home?" He chuckled lightly, starting the engine. "What can I say? The streets of Lagos never sleep, and neither do I." She shook her head, smiling. "You're something else, Femi. Most drivers would have given up on this traffic business by now." "Maybe I'm just stubborn," he replied, glancing at her through the mirror. "Or maybe I've got good company to keep me going." Nkem rolled her eyes, but he caught the faintest hint of a smile. "You're such a smooth talker. I'm not falling for it. I'm just being honest," Femi said, his tone playful. But deep down, he wished he could truly be honest, with her and with himself. The ride home started like any other, with Nkem talking about her day. Femi listened, nodding at the right moments, but his mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the weight of his secret, about how much longer he could keep it hidden. "You're awfully quiet tonight," Nkem said suddenly, breaking his thoughts. "Is something wrong?" Femi hesitated, gripping the wheel tighter. "No, nothing's wrong. Just a lot on my mind." "Like what?" she asked, leaning forward slightly. "You've been driving me around for weeks now, but I feel like I don't really know you." The question hit harder than he expected. He glanced at her through the mirror, seeing the genuine curiosity in her eyes. She wasn't asking to pry or judge. She just wanted to know him, and that made it even harder to lie. "I guess I'm just trying to figure out who I am," Femi said finally, choosing his words carefully. "Life hasn't exactly been straightforward for me." Nkem tilted her head, studying him. "What do you mean?" "It's complicated," he said, his voice quieter. "Let's just say I've made some choices that put me in a place I never expected to be." Nkem nodded slowly, her expression softening. "Well, whoever you are, Femi, I can tell you're a good person. You're kind and you listen. That's more than I can say for most people I meet." Her words warmed him, but they also deepened his guilt. How could she think so highly of him when he was hiding so much? As they reached her house, Nkem hesitated before stepping out of the car. "Femi, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he said, though his chest tightened with nervousness. "Why do you do this?" she asked, gesturing to the taxi. "You don't seem like someone who would choose this job. Is there something you're not telling me?" Femi froze for a moment, caught off guard by her question. He opened his mouth to respond but stopped himself. If he told her the truth now, would she understand? Or would it ruin everything they had built? "It's a long story," he said finally, forcing a smile. "Maybe I'll tell you someday." Nkem frowned slightly but didn't press further. "All right, Femi. Good night." "Good night, Nkem," he replied, watching as she walked away. That night, Femi couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the conversation in his head. He wanted to tell her the truth, but the fear of losing her kept him silent. What if she thought he was just another rich guy playing games? What if she walked away and never looked back? The next morning, he decided to confide in someone he trusted, his best friend, Jide. They met at a small cafe, and Femi wasted no time diving into the issue. "She's amazing, Jide," Femi said, stirring his coffee absent-mindedly. "She's strong, smart, and she actually cares about people. But I can't stop feeling like I'm lying to her every time I see her." "Well, you are lying to her," Jide said bluntly, leaning back in his chair. "You've been pretending to be someone you're not. What did you think would happen?" "I don't know," Femi admitted, running a hand through his hair. "I thought maybe it wouldn't matter, but it does. Every time she looks at me, I feel like I'm letting her down." Jide sighed, shaking his head. "Look, Femi, you need to tell her the truth. Sooner or later, she's going to find out. And if it doesn't come from you, it's going to be a lot worse." "I know," Femi said, his voice heavy. "But what if she hates me for it? What if she doesn't want anything to do with me after that?" "Then you'll know where you stand," Jide said simply. "But if you keep lying, you're only going to make things harder for both of you." Femi nodded, knowing his friend was right. But the thought of losing Nkem still terrified him. The next time he saw Nkem, Femi decided to take a step toward honesty, without revealing everything just yet. As they drove through the busy streets of Lagos, he turned to her and said, "Nkem, can I ask you something?" "Sure," she said, looking up from her phone. "Do you believe people can change?" he asked, his voice careful. Nkem raised an eyebrow. "What kind of question is that?" "Just curious," Femi said with a shrug. "Do you think someone who's made mistakes can become better?" Nkem thought for a moment before replying. "I think anyone can change if they really want to, but it's not easy. Takes work." Femi nodded, her words sinking in. "What if they're scared? What if they're afraid people won't give them a chance?" "Then they need to prove themselves," Nkem said firmly. "Actions speak louder than words. Femi, if someone wants to change, they have to show it." Her answer gave him a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to prove himself to her. But life had a way of complicating things. That evening, as Femi dropped Nkem off at her house, a young man stepped out of the gate. He was tall and lean, with sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Femi watched as the man approached the taxi, his expression cautious. "Nkem, who's this?" the man asked, his gaze flickering to Femi. "This is Femi," Nkem said, her tone casual. "He's been giving me rides from work." The man frowned, crossing his arms. "You trust him?" "Chijioke, stop it," Nkem said, rolling her eyes. "Femi's a good guy. You don't have to interrogate him." Femi smiled politely, though he could feel the tension in the air. "Nice to meet you, Chijioke." Chijioke didn't return the smile. Instead, he studied Femi for a long moment before saying, "Same here. Just make sure you're looking out for my sister." "I always do," Femi said, meeting his gaze. Nkem sighed, shaking her head. "All right, enough of this. Let's go inside, Chijioke." "Good night, Femi." "Good night," Femi replied, watching as they walked away. As he drove off, Femi couldn't shake the feeling that Chijioke didn't trust him, and that he might be right to feel that way. The morning air felt heavy, like something was about to go wrong. Femi parked his taxi a few streets away from the clinic, resting his forehead on the steering wheel. He'd been thinking a lot about his conversation with Chijioke the night before. The young man's suspicious stare lingered in his mind like an unanswered question. Was he pushing his luck by staying in Nkem's life? Could he keep hiding the truth much longer? Femi sighed and leaned back in his seat. He didn't have much time to think about it because his phone buzzed on the dashboard. Picking it up, he saw a message from Jide. "Let's grab lunch later. You need to relax before you lose your mind." Femi chuckled. Jide wasn't wrong, but right now, lunch was the last thing on his mind. He was about to reply when he noticed movement near the clinic. Nkem was standing outside with two other nurses, their faces tight with worry. They were talking to a man in a dark suit who didn't look happy. Femi watched as the man handed Nkem a piece of paper before walking away, his shoulders stiff and unyielding. Something was wrong. A few hours later, Nkem stepped into Femi's taxi. She was quiet, unusually so, and her hands gripped her bag tightly. Femi glanced at her through the rearview mirror, waiting for her to say something. When she didn't, he broke the silence. "Rough day?" he asked gently. Nkem sighed, rubbing her temples. "You could say that. The clinic is in trouble." Femi frowned. "What kind of trouble?" "The landlord wants to sell the building," she said, her voice heavy with frustration. "Apparently, some big developer offered him a ridiculous amount of money to turn the place into a shopping mall. We've been given 30 days to leave." Femi's heart sank. 30 days? That's barely enough time to do anything. "Exactly," Nkem said, her voice rising slightly. "Where are we supposed to go? How are we supposed to help our patients without a building? Most of them can't afford to go anywhere else. It's not fair." Her anger was palpable, and Femi felt a surge of helplessness. He wanted to fix it, to make everything better for her, but he knew he couldn't reveal who he really was. Not yet. "Is there anything you can do?" he asked, trying to sound hopeful. Nkem shook her head. "Not unless we find a miracle. We don't have the money to fight this, and no one's lining up to donate to a small clinic like ours." Femi nodded slowly, his mind already racing. Maybe there was something he could do without exposing himself. But for now, he focused on listening to her, letting her vent her frustrations. The next day, Femi found himself parked outside the clinic again, watching as patients came and went. He saw Nkem through the window, moving quickly between rooms, her face set in determination despite the chaos around her. He wanted to help, but how? If he swooped in with money, she would immediately know he wasn't just a taxi driver. But if he did nothing, the clinic would close, and Nkem would lose everything she had worked so hard for. Later that evening, he called Jide. "Jide, I need your help," Femi said, pacing back and forth in his small apartment. "Oh," Jide replied, his voice teasing. "What kind of trouble are you in now?" "It's not about me," Femi said quickly. "It's about Nkem. Her clinic is in danger of being shut down. The landlord wants to sell the building to some developer. And you want to save it," Jide said, his tone turning serious. "Femi, are you sure about this? You're already in deep with this girl. If you step in now, you might blow your cover." "I don't care," Femi said, his voice firm. "She doesn't deserve this. The clinic doesn't deserve this. I just need to figure out a way to help without her finding out." Jide sighed. "All right, let me make a few calls. Maybe we can find a way to delay the sale or negotiate with the landlord." "Thanks, Jide," Femi said, relief washing over him. "I owe you one." "You owe me more than one," Jide replied with a chuckle. "But don't worry, I've got your back." A few days later, Nkem climbed into Femi's taxi, her face brighter than it had been all week. Femi glanced at her through the mirror, curious. "You look like you've had some good news," he said. Nkem nodded, her smile small but genuine. "The landlord called today. He said he's reconsidering the sale and might give us more time to figure things out." "That's great," Femi said, genuinely happy for her. "Do you know what changed his mind?" Nkem shook her head. "No idea. But honestly, I'm just grateful. Maybe our luck is finally turning around." Femi smiled, relieved that his plan had worked. Jide had managed to pull some strings, convincing the landlord to delay the sale. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it bought Nkem and the clinic some much-needed time. As the days passed, Nkem's mood lifted, and Femi felt a growing sense of satisfaction. He knew he couldn't keep his secret forever, but for now he was glad he could help her in some small way. One evening, as he drove her home, Nkem turned to him with a thoughtful expression. "Femi, can I ask you something?" she said. "Of course," he replied, though his chest tightened slightly. "Why are you always so kind?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Most people don't care about what I do or what happens to the clinic. but you're always there, always listening. Why? Femi hesitated, his grip on the wheel tightening. Because I care about you, Nkem, he said finally, his voice steady. You're doing something important, something that matters. And I want to support you, even if it's just by being here. Nkem was silent for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. You're a good man, Femi, she said softly. I just wish more people saw the world the way you do. Her words warmed him, but they also reminded him of the lie he was living. How long could he keep pretending? And what would happen when she found out the truth? As they reached her house, Femi watched her step out of the car, his chest heavy with conflicting emotions. He wanted to be honest with her, to tell her everything. But for now, he could only hope that when the time came, she would understand. Good night, Nkem, he said as she closed the door. Good night, Femi, she replied, her smile lingering as she walked away. As Femi drove off, he couldn't shake the feeling that their connection was growing stronger, and that his secret was becoming harder to keep. The sun was setting over Lagos, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Femi sat in his taxi outside the clinic, tapping his fingers nervously on the steering wheel. Tonight he felt different, uneasy. His secret had become a heavy weight on his shoulders, and it felt like the walls were closing in. For weeks he had managed to keep up the charade. But how much longer could he pretend? Every time Nkem smiled at him or called him a good person, guilt gnawed at his chest. She deserved to know the truth, but the thought of losing her was unbearable. The clinic doors opened, and Nkem stepped out, her bag slung over her shoulder. She looked tired but hopeful, a faint smile on her lips. Femi's heart tightened as she approached the car. Tonight, he decided he would tell her. No more lies. Femi, Nkem said as she climbed into the back seat, thanks for waiting. It's been a crazy day. Crazy how? He asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Just everything, she said, letting out a sigh. The clinic is still struggling, but at least the landlord hasn't brought up the sale again. I'm grateful for that. It's like we've been given a second chance. Femi smiled faintly, but the guilt in his chest grew heavier. She had no idea he was the reason for that second chance. As they drove through the crowded streets, Femi glanced at her through the rearview mirror. Nkem, can I ask you something? Of course, she said, leaning back in her seat. What would you do if someone you cared about lied to you? He asked, his voice quieter than usual. Nkem frowned, sitting up slightly. That's a strange question. Why are you asking? Just curious, Femi said quickly, trying to sound casual. I mean, would you be able to forgive them if they had good intentions? Nkem thought for a moment, her gaze distant. It depends on the lie, she said finally. If it was something small, something harmless, maybe I could forgive. But if it was something big, something that hurt me, I don't know. It would be hard. Femi's grip on the steering wheel tightened. Her words made his chest feel even heavier. What if they lied because they were scared of losing you? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Nkem tilted her head, studying him through the mirror. Femi, is there something you're not telling me? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and saw Jide's name. Normally, he would ignore it, but something about the timing made him uneasy. Sorry, I need to take this, he said, pulling over to the side of the road. He stepped out of the car and answered the call. Jide, what's up? He asked, his voice low. Femi, we've got a problem, Jide said, his tone urgent. Chijioke's been asking questions about you. He's digging around, trying to figure out who you really are. Femi's stomach dropped. What? How does he even know to look into me? I don't know, Jide said, frustration clear in his voice. But he's getting close. If you don't tell Nkem the truth soon, someone else will. Femi closed his eyes, his mind racing. Chijioke's suspicion had been clear from the start, but he hadn't expected it to escalate so quickly. Thanks for letting me know, he said before hanging up. When Femi climbed back into the taxi, Nkem was watching him closely. What's going on? She asked, her voice laced with concern. Nothing, Femi said quickly, starting the engine. Just a friend needing advice. Nkem didn't look convinced, but she didn't press further. As they continued the drive, Femi's mind raced. He had to tell her the truth before someone else did. He couldn't let Chijiok ruin everything. They reached Nkem's house, but instead of letting her leave, Femi turned off the engine and turned to face her. "Nkem, wait," he said, his voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." She frowned, her hand on the door handle. "What is it, Femi? You're acting strange." He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Her eyes narrowed, confusion flashing across her face. "What do you mean?" "I'm not just a taxi driver," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "My name is Femi Adiwale. My father is one of the wealthiest businessmen in Lagos. I've been pretending to be a taxi driver to prove to him, and to myself, that I can live like a regular person." Nkem stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You've been lying to me this whole time?" "Yes," Femi admitted, his voice breaking. "But it wasn't because I wanted to hurt you. I didn't know how to tell you. I was scared you'd look at me differently." Her face hardened, and she stepped out of the car, slamming the door shut. "Scared? You think that excuse is lying to me? I trusted you, Femi." Femi jumped out of the car, his heart racing. "Nkem, please just listen. Everything I said to you, everything we shared, it was real. I didn't mean for this to happen." She turned to face him, anger flashing in her eyes. "You didn't mean for what to happen? For me to believe you were someone you're not? For me to think I had a real friend, only to find out it was all a lie?" "It wasn't all a lie," Femi said desperately. "I care about you, Nkem, more than I've ever cared about anyone." Nkem shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "You had so many chances to tell me the truth, Femi. So many. But you didn't. And now I don't even know who you are." Before he could respond, the front gate opened, and Chijiok stepped out. His gaze flicked between them, and he smirked. "So it's true. You're not just some ordinary guy." "Chijiok, not now," Nkem said sharply, her voice breaking. "No, I think now is the perfect time," Chijiok said, crossing his arms. "This guy's been lying to you from the start, and you deserve to know." "I already know," Nkem snapped, her voice rising. "And I don't need you making it worse." Chijiok's smirk faded, and he looked genuinely surprised. "All right, I'll stay out of it. But don't say I didn't warn you." He walked back into the house, leaving Femi and Nkem standing in tense silence. Femi reached out, his hand trembling. "Nkem, please. I'll do anything to make this right." She looked at him, her eyes filled with hurt. "I don't know if you can, Femi. You broke my trust, and I don't know if I can forgive that." Femi's heart shattered as she turned and walked away, disappearing through the gate. He stood there for a long time, the weight of his actions crashing down on him. For the first time in his life, he truly understood what it meant to lose something you couldn't replace. As he got back into his taxi and drove away, Femi couldn't shake the feeling that he had lost more than just Nkem's trust. He had lost a part of himself. The road ahead felt emptier than ever, and he had no idea how to fix what he had broken. Femi sat in his taxi, staring blankly at the steering wheel. The streets of Lagos bustled around him, but it all felt distant, like he was watching a movie without sound. His chest felt heavy, his mind replaying Nkem's words over and over again. "I don't know if I can forgive that." Those words hit harder than anything his father had ever said to him. He hadn't just lost Nkem's trust, he'd lost her completely. She was the one person who had made him feel like more than just the billionaire's son. And now she was gone. A knock on the car window jolted him back to reality. It was Jide, holding a takeout bag in one hand and looking concerned. Femi unlocked the door, and Jide slid into the passenger seat. "You look like you haven't slept," Jide said, handing him the bag. "Eat something before you pass out." "I'm not hungry," Femi mumbled, pushing the bag aside. "Femi," Jide said firmly, turning to face him, "you need to pull yourself together. Sitting here feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to fix anything." Femi let out a bitter laugh. "Fix what? Kem hates me, Jide. She doesn't even want to look at me. What's the point?" Jide sighed, running a hand through his hair. "The point is, you care about her. And if you care about someone, you don't just give up. You find a way to make things right. But how? Femi asked, his voice cracking. I lied to her, Jide. I broke her trust. What can I possibly do to fix that? Jide was quiet for a moment, his gaze thoughtful. You show her who you really are, Femi. Not the billionaire's son, not the fake taxi driver. Just you. The guy who cares about her and wants to help. Femi nodded slowly, the weight of Jide's words sinking in. He didn't know if it would work, but he couldn't just walk away. Not without trying. The next day, Femi parked his taxi outside the clinic, but this time he didn't go inside. He watched from a distance as Nkem moved between patients, her focus unwavering despite the chaos around her. She looked tired, but her determination was as strong as ever. He wanted to approach her, to tell her how sorry he was, but he knew it wasn't the right time. Instead, he drove to his father's office, a place he had avoided since starting his taxi journey. Chief Adewale was sitting behind his massive desk, reviewing documents, when Femi walked in. The older man looked up, surprised. Femi, he said, setting down his pen. To what do I owe the pleasure? Femi hesitated for a moment before speaking. I need your help, Dad. Chief Adewale raised an eyebrow. Help? That's a first. What kind of help? Femi took a deep breath. There's a clinic in danger of shutting down. They help people who can't afford treatment and they're running out of time. I want to save it. The chief leaned back in his chair, studying Femi carefully. Why this clinic? What's your connection to it? It's complicated, Femi admitted. But the people there need help. They deserve it. And I want to do something good for once. Something real. Chief Adewale was silent for a moment before nodding. All right, I'll make some calls. But this isn't just about money, Femi. If you're serious about this, you'll need to be involved every step of the way. I will be, Femi said, his voice firm. Thank you, Dad. Over the next few days, Femi threw himself into the project. He met with the clinic's landlord, negotiated a new lease, and arranged for much-needed repairs to the building. He worked late into the night, determined to make things right. Not just for Nkem, but for everyone who relied on the clinic. But despite his efforts, he couldn't shake the feeling of emptiness. Nkem still hadn't spoken to him, and he didn't know if she ever would. One evening, Femi stood in the clinic's waiting room, staring at the peeling paint on the walls and the rows of worn-out chairs. The place was alive with activity. Nurses darting between patients, the faint hum of machines, and the occasional cries of children. This was where Nkem spent her days, fighting to help people who had nowhere else to go. It was where she gave so much of herself. He took a deep breath and adjusted the rolled-up sleeves of his shirt. Today was the final step of his plan to save the clinic, and he wanted to make sure everything went perfectly. It wasn't just about earning Nkem's forgiveness anymore. It was about doing something meaningful, something he could be proud of. The front doors swung open, and Nkem walked in, her bag slung over her shoulder. She paused when she saw him, her expression unreadable. Femi's heart thudded in his chest. He had been waiting for this moment, but now that it was here, he wasn't sure what to say. Nkem, he began, taking a step forward. She raised a hand, stopping him. What are you doing here, Femi? I came to make sure everything is ready, he said, his voice steady. The clinic renovations are almost complete, and the landlord has agreed to a new lease. You're not losing this place. Nkem's eyes narrowed. Why are you doing all this? Is it just to make yourself feel better? No, Femi said quickly. I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And because I care about you, Nkem. I always have. Her gaze softened, but only slightly. You think fixing the clinic is enough to fix what you broke between us? I know it's not, Femi admitted, but it's a start. And I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. The sound of the front desk phone ringing interrupted the moment, and Nkem turned away to answer it. Femi watched her, his heart aching. She was still keeping her distance, and he didn't blame her. He had lied to her, and trust wasn't something you could rebuild overnight. As the call ended, Nkem looked back at him. The patients will be here soon. If you want to help, you can start by carrying those supplies to the storage room. Femi nodded, grateful for the chance to do something. He picked up a box of medical supplies and followed her down the hallway. As they walked, he tried to break the silence. "Nkem, I know I've said it before, but I really am sorry," he said quietly. "If I could go back and do things differently, I would." She stopped in front of the storage room and turned to face him. "You can't change the past, Femi. But you can decide what kind of person you want to be moving forward." Her words hit him hard, and he nodded. "I want to be someone you can trust again." Nkem didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pushed the door open and motioned for him to place the box on a shelf. As he did, she leaned against the doorway, watching him. "I don't know if I can trust you again, Femi," she said finally, her voice soft, "but I can see you're trying. And that means something." Femi turned to her, hope flickering in his chest. "Does that mean I still have a chance?" She sighed, crossing her arms. "It means we'll see. Trust takes time, Femi. And right now, I need to focus on this clinic." "I understand," he said. "I'll be here to help, no matter what, over the next few weeks." Femi threw himself into the work. He coordinated with contractors to finish the repairs, organized donations, and even helped clean the clinic during his free time. Nkem watched him from a distance, her guard still up, but he noticed the small ways she began to let him in. One evening, as they were locking up the clinic, Nkem spoke up. "You've done a lot for this place, Femi. The patients, the staff. We're all grateful. It's the least I could do," he said, glancing at her. "I'm just glad I could help." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe you're not the person I thought you were. Maybe you're better." Her words warmed him, but he knew there was still a long way to go. He wasn't just fighting for her trust. He was fighting to prove to himself that he could be the person she saw in him. The grand reopening of the clinic arrived faster than Femi expected. Patients and staff filled the waiting room, their smiles and laughter a stark contrast to the tension that had hung over the place weeks ago. Nkem moved through the crowd, thanking everyone who had contributed. Femi stood near the back, watching her with a mixture of pride and nervousness. He had done everything he could to save the clinic, but he still didn't know where he stood with her. As the event wound down, Nkem approached him. "Femi," she said, her voice soft, "can we talk?" "Of course," he said, following her to a quiet corner. She took a deep breath, her gaze meeting his. "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened. About the lies, the work you've done here, and the person you've shown me you can be." "And?" Femi asked, his heart pounding. "And I think I want to give this a chance," she said, a small smile breaking through. "But on one condition." "Anything," Femi said quickly. "No more secrets," Nkem said firmly. "If we're going to try this, I need to know I can trust you completely." Femi nodded, his chest swelling with relief. "No more secrets. Promise." As they stood there, surrounded by the sounds of celebration, Femi felt a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, he felt like he was on the right path. One that wasn't defined by his father's wealth or his own mistakes, but by the person he was becoming. And for the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he and Nkem could build something real. Something worth fighting for. The following weeks felt like a new chapter in Femi's life. The clinic was running better than ever, and Nkem had started to lower her walls, letting him into her life bit by bit. He didn't take her trust for granted. Every day, he worked hard to show her he was serious. Not just about her, but about becoming the man he wanted to be. One sunny afternoon, Femi waited for Nkem outside the clinic. She had agreed to have lunch with him, a small but significant step forward. As she walked out, she looked calm, her hair tied neatly in a bun and her bag slung over her shoulder. "You're early," Nkem said, raising an eyebrow. "Only because I couldn't wait to see you," Femi replied with a grin. Nkem rolled her eyes, but the corners of her lips twitched upward. "You're hopeless. And yet, you're still here," Femi said, opening the taxi door for her. "Come on. I found this little place you're going to love." The restaurant was a cozy, family-run spot tucked away in a quiet corner of Lagos. The air was filled with the smell of jollof rice, fried plantains, and grilled fish. Femi had chosen it carefully, knowing Kem would appreciate the simplicity and warmth of the place. "This is nice," Kem said as they sat down. "Not what I expected from you, though. I thought you'd take me somewhere fancy." "Fancy isn't always better," Femi said, handing her a menu. "Besides, I wanted this to be about us, not about impressing anyone." Kem studied him for a moment before nodding. "Fair enough." As they waited for their food, the conversation drifted to lighter topics. Femi told her stories from his taxi driving days, and she shared funny moments from her time at the clinic. For the first time in weeks, it felt easy, like they were two people figuring things out together. But as they were finishing their meal, Kem's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her expression shifted. Femi noticed the change immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's the clinic," Kem said, frowning. "One of the nurses just called. There's a situation with a patient." "Do you need to go?" Femi asked, already reaching for his wallet. "Yes," she said, standing quickly. "But it's not far. You can drop me off on the way back." Femi nodded, paying for the meal and hurrying to the car. As they drove, Kem's phone buzzed again, and she answered it, her tone sharp and professional. "What happened?" "Okay, keep him stable. I'm on my way." When she hung up, her jaw was tight. "It's a boy. He collapsed outside the clinic. He's in bad shape, and we don't have enough supplies to handle it." Femi's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Is there anything I can do to help?" "Just get me there fast," Kem said, her voice firm. When they arrived at the clinic, Kem jumped out of the car and rushed inside. Femi hesitated for a moment before following her. He wasn't a doctor or a nurse, but he couldn't just sit outside while she dealt with this alone. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Nurses moved quickly, their faces serious. In one of the treatment rooms, a young boy lay unconscious on a stretcher, his breathing shallow. Kem was already by his side, giving instructions to the staff. Femi stood in the doorway, unsure of what to do. Then Kem turned to him, her eyes sharp. "Femi, we need more oxygen tanks. There's a supplier a few blocks away. Can you get them?" "On it," Femi said without hesitation. He ran out of the clinic and jumped into his taxi, his heart pounding. He didn't know much about medical emergencies, but he knew one thing: time was critical. The drive to the supplier felt like an eternity. Traffic was as chaotic as ever, and Femi found himself weaving through cars, honking his horn, and shouting at drivers who refused to move. When he finally reached the supplier, he wasted no time explaining the situation. "We need oxygen tanks for a boy who's critical," Femi said urgently. "Please, it's an emergency." The staff moved quickly, loading 2 tanks into the back of his taxi. Femi didn't wait for thanks or receipts. He threw some cash at them and sped back to the clinic. When he arrived, Kem was waiting outside, her face a mixture of relief and urgency. "You got them?" "Right here," Femi said, jumping out of the car and helping her unload the tanks. They carried them inside, and the nurses quickly connected one to the boy's oxygen mask. The room fell silent as everyone watched, waiting to see if it would make a difference. After a tense few moments, the boy's breathing steadied. Kem let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "You saved him," one of the nurses said, looking at Kem. "We all did," she replied, glancing at Femi. "Thank you." Femi nodded, his chest tight with emotion. He hadn't done much, but in that moment he felt like he was part of something bigger, something that mattered. Later that evening, as the clinic quieted down, Kem found Femi sitting on a bench outside. She sat next to him, her hands clasped in her lap. "You didn't have to stay," she said softly. "I wanted to," Femi said. "I wanted to be here for you." Kem looked at him, her eyes searching his face. "You're different, Femi. When I first met you, I didn't think you understood what it meant to care about other people. But now I see how much you've changed." "I had a good teacher," Femi said with a small smile. Kem smiled back, and for the first time it felt real, like the walls between them were finally coming down. The night air was cool, and the city lights flickered in the distance. As they sat there in comfortable silence, Femi realized something. This wasn't the end of their story, it was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, but for the first time he felt ready to face them. And with Nkem by his side, he believed they could handle anything. But in the shadows, someone watched them, a figure lingering just out of sight. Their eyes glinted with something dangerous, and as they turned to leave, they pulled out a phone. "It's time," the voice said, cold and calculated. "They won't see it coming." Femi and Kem had no idea their pasts weren't done with them yet. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please leave a like and subscribe. Here is another interesting story to watch. Click to watch now.